Recording. So today, we're going to be covering, wait for it, Rails. Yeah. Up to this point, you've been working with Ruby, right? Working pretty heavy with Ruby. We've been working pretty heavy yesterday with making SQL commands, right? Which is different than Mongo. Mongo is another database tool. Postgres is a different database tool. One is kind of object-oriented. Everything is objects, and the other is a SQL-based command. So one is NoSQL, and the other is SQL. And so we're going to be incorporating Postgres into our Rails app. And so Rails. So what we'll be building. So throughout the week, we're going to be building one app, and that's, once again, consistency that we always try to do. Build one thing throughout the project, throughout, instructional time, so you can see things building on top of each other. So that there's a connect. So today we're going to be building out the back end. We're going to be focused on building out our server with our connection to our database, and we will be providing that data as an API, really. So what we're really building today is an API server in a way. We'll be able, and building a server entails routes, right? We need routes. We need controllers, right? We need controllers that are going to get access to the model that kind of sets up the schema, that creates the database. So we need all of that. And then we just need to respond back with JSON. That's really all we need to do. We don't need templates right now. Once we get our server set up today, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to move into React. We're going to learn some React and then put the front end and back end together and do something called React on Rails, where React is incorporated into it. Kind of like, EJS. EJS was templates. React are or can be templates, but it's also a framework for structuring the front end portion of your application. We all know React is like, oh, React, I want React, right? So we'll keep building the app that keeps tracks of contacts. That's where we'll have. And so contacts are going to have people, right? People are just, we're going to keep it really simple. People will have a name and an age. That's our contact. So I feel like contacts, you probably have a contact in there, right? A number or an address versus their age. And then locations, we're going to create where one or more of the people will live or work. And a location can have many people, and people will have only one location, right? So Matt was creating these tables yesterday and doing the table joins and showing you the companies in Google and Apple and the people, and then this little middle table that was this person could work in multiple jobs. Trying to emphasize that that's really kind of how the back end is structured as it pertains to databases. That you're going to have these separated tables, and he referenced them as tables yesterday because now we're in the land of SQL versus collections in the land of NoSQL. And I remember pushing some of the squads to do that. When the question came up, I think Jeremy's squad, I was like, yeah, you should really consider multiple collections and kind of join them and look for things, because that's really where we were headed. And so you got a head start on that. So what is Rails? So Rails is a server-side web application. It's a framework built on Ruby. Just like if somebody was to say, hey, what's Node? You would say, it's a server, right? Node isn't a web server. Node is a server that you can install a web package and turn it into a web server. It could also be half a dozen other things that servers can do. But Rails is really built as a server-side web application framework. Framework being the key word here. It's just not like Node, where you were able just to do things, name things. I didn't have to call the folder controller. I could have called it whatever I wanted to call it, right? I would need to kind of systematically kind of look at it as a controllers folder, but it didn't have to be called controllers. It could have been just called users stuff, right? But I know it's acting like a controller. When you're talking frameworks, frameworks are the thing needs to be written like this. Very structured, very opinionated, and Ruby is just that. When we spin up our Rails server, it's going to create a structure and expect that you write your code according to the construct upon which it dictates you must do it. All right, which is good, because then I know if I take a look at your Rails application, they're going to make sense. Hey, this thing should be here. If I'm, troubleshooting this thing, well, then it should be in that folder, in that file. There's no assumptions as to where it should be. It has to be in there because it's a framework, and this framework dictates that. So the other important things with Rails, besides being a framework and providing that structure, is that it's open source, free to use. Anyone can contribute, which is awesome, right? It's a vast collection because it's open source and it's been around for quite some time. There's a huge community. It's also a mature platform. People would call it a mature platform. Like Node has been around not too long, not as long as Rails, and it's continually developing itself along with the JavaScript language, right? JavaScript, I think they're up to ES6 as the current iteration of JavaScript. So ES8. ES6 came out with a bunch of new stuff, ES7 with more stuff, ES8 with new stuff, and they keep pushing the envelope with JavaScript, trying to make it a mature language like Ruby, trying to make Node a platform comparable to Rails. But it is open source, huge community. It follows the MVC framework, and it really follows it. It is a framework that it uses. And so there's model views and controllers, and you have to follow that design. You will see just how opinionated Rails is. And by opinionated, I mean you have to write the thing in this way. Any deviation from that, it breaks. It features RESTful application design, as though we can set up the database and turn it into an API server, really, is what we're doing. So to spin up something really quick, to get an API server up and running really quick, Rails is probably like the easiest thing to do that. It uses some built-in object relational mapping techniques to convert data between incompatible types, right? So for us, what we're going to be doing is converting data that is in like rows and columns, tables, into JSON. So PSQL is going to create tables, right? Postgres is going to create tables, a database with tables. A database can contain multiple tables. But we need that data converted into JSON so we can send it, right? We're an API service, so we send JSON. So who does that? How do we convert that? So Rails does have a tool called Active Record, and it uses this Active Record pattern to do that. It encourages agile web development, agile being like small sprints of things, develop small things, get them out and running, work with them, and then move on to the next small thing so that you can develop smaller things quicker than like, hey, we're going to build this monstrosity of a functionality and it's going to take 6 months. You won't see any of the functionality for 6 months versus, hey, we're going to split it out into these 10 little things and like deliver 10 things out. And it's strongly focused on testing and utilizing testing for documentation. Now, as it pertains to testing, any of the code pens that you clicked on as per the computer science material provided by General Assembly, those slides, and at the end of the slides, it's like, hey, give merge sort and quick sort a test, had testing. We're not going to go into testing. I'm just showing you the concept of testing, and you can always take a look at it. But this was the merge sort that, the code pen that they provided with some testing. And in here, this is testing. uses this tool called Mocha and Chai to do the testing, and they build these tests that expect input. They'll validate the input, and this is a whole genre of skill sets to work with testing to test that your code meets the expectations. We're not going to go into this. It's kind of doing it under the hood. When we get to React, React does have some testing, but I might take a look into that. I just kind of wanted to show you because you have been exposed to it. You may have just kind of looked at me like, I don't really know what the hell's going on. But if your code didn't meet these requirements, right? The fact that this turns green is because it met the tests. That's why it's green. If it didn't meet the tests, then it wouldn't be green. Okay? Cool. So Active Record, it is awesome. It is a really cool tool. But we're going to, in order to get more experience with SQL, which is what we're trying to do with Postgres, right? Learning Postgres gives you the SQL tools you need versus something like it's an ORM. The thing just does it all behind the scenes, and we don't really have to do much. We just ask for it, and it gives us the data, right? So SQL queries are something that you really should, I'm not going to say be fully adept in, but I've had students go on interviews where they ask them to create SQL queries. If you put SQL on your resume and the job says, hey, experience with SQL, expect possibly that they may say, hey, that's great. So you have these two tables, and I need you to select the users that have this. Can you do it? Can you write the SQL query on the whiteboard, right? So that may be something that's expected. So we want to give you that more experience using SQL-based queries. Now, Rails philosophy, don't repeat yourself. Do it once, do it well. Don't write repetitive code. One of the other things here is convention over configuration. Convention being the framework kind of model, that it's written in this way. Okay, and now I was just looking for maybe a solid article that described, convention over frameworks, and I just kind of found this one. I thought it really caught my attention. Like convention, I lost it. Convention over configuration is a simple concept, primarily used in programming. It means that the environment in which you work, system and libraries, assumes that the logical situations by default, so it's assuming things and predisposing the application to do things. So if you adapt them rather than creating your own rules each time, programming becomes easier and more productive. So if I know how the system works, I can make the system work for me, right? That's the idea. Convention means it's written in this structure, and we need to write it like that, okay? Versus configuration. Configuration is all Node and Express, right? Like I said, you could write it not any which way you want, but you have the fluidity of creating files and folders and naming them to your whim, which isn't a great way to write your server, right? It's the same with creating pseudocode that's consistent. We all see it, we all understand it. Rails is the same way. So Rails also provides you tons of functionality. We understand Ruby does that right out of the box, right? There's all these magical things that we only wish JavaScript had a little button for to press that did the same thing. In order to do it, though, in order to use that, once again, you have to follow the Rails conventions. Deviating from that is just going to cause you tons and tons of grief. Today, this morning session is going to be about resolving lots of errors. Guarantee you, during this process of us installing things, the smallest, slightest, mistype or something wasn't started, Rails is going to crash on us. And it does it for good reason. It's like, this thing isn't working, it needs to be working, we want the server, right? And that's a good thing. And the error messages are kind of intuitive about where you should go look to fix it. Node wasn't that intuitive, right? Node just had a bunch of command line stuff, and it was like, this file crashed, this file crashed, this file crashed, and none of the files were any files that you worked on. They were like Node packages, and you're like, I don't really know where this thing broke. Rails is a bit more kind of intuitive on where it broke and possibly how to fix it. Once again, large community. So the comparison between the two, comparison between Express and Rails. Express uses JavaScript, Rails uses Ruby, right? We still need, you will always need JavaScript on the front end. If the user wants to click, slide, scroll and animations happen, type of form, collect data, that is all JavaScript. So JavaScript was always a part of the front end. And it wasn't until like Node came around and Express that, hey, wow, we could have JavaScript on the back end. This is crazy cool. Now I just need one skill set, right? Instead of having to master Ruby and try to master JavaScript, I can get strong at one. For the database, when we were doing Express, we used Mongo. In Rails, we're going to use Postgres. In Express, I've set up Express service in other classes where we've done Postgres as the database. And in Rails, we use Active Record. Like, this could go either way. ODM, ORM, we used Express, used Mongoose. And in Rails, once again, we're not going to be using Active Record here. We'll be writing our own SQL queries to say what we want. So ORM is kind of like that. Hey, just type in this create and like give it the thing and it does it. Here we have to do insert into and then give it the values that we want to insert value and then tell it the fields and the values that we want to match. Third party, if we wanted to install any packages in Express, we did NPMs. In Rails, it's gems and bundler install. So Node, it would have been like npm install, and it would have been install everything. In Rails, it's bundle install. And what would it do? It'll just look through the gem file, which is comparable to the package JSON file, and just like run through it and install everything, okay? Server-side rendering, Express used EJS or Handlebars. Handlebars is another templating engine. There's things like Pug. There's like lots of Express server-side rendering. Even React is now or can be server-side rendered. Rails uses ERB. So you see here, EJS and then ERB. Now we're going to be using React, but ERB would have been like the default go-to if you weren't using React. To run the server, we know in Express we did node mom, but that also required that we installed a specific thing. If it was not, it would be like node, and it would start the server name. Node mom goes right into package JSON, finds the file, starts it. Or here we're going to be using Rails S. And something called Puma. So it uses some additional tools to help get the server up and running. All right, are we ready to tackle Rails, right? Sweet. All right, so go into, open up a terminal and go into the student examples. All right, there we go. So I have to go in there. I'm going to change directory into documents. Documents. Change directory CI. Remote video. Unit 4. Week 10. Oh, it's so week 10 already. Yeah, it's crazy. Instructor. Examples. Bloop. All right. I'll zoom in a little bit. We're in instructor examples, right? What I want to do before we run that command, what I'd like to do is set up our terminal, because we're going to have a few tabs open for the terminal. So I'm going to do Command T, or I'm just going to open up a new terminal window. So Command T, bloop. I have now two terminal windows open, right, side by side. Oh, this is this one. This is this one. Now, what I want to do is also name these so throughout the rest of the day we kind of know exactly what the names of this one are versus the name of that one. Like, what is this one doing versus that one? The reason why we're opening different ones, similar to when we did Express, right? We needed Mongo started, so we had to do MongoD. That thing ran. Then we needed a Node one where we ran Node, similar to that. So this first one here, I'm going to go up into the shell. Is it the shell? Yeah. So if I click on just this first tab, so the first tab's highlighted, I go to shell and I go to edit title. Shell, edit title. I'm going to call this. Now I'm not going to title the terminal window, the one at tab title. I'm going to call it Rails. That's it. And you'll see Rails change its name to Rails, right? I'm going to do it again. with the second tab. You have to make sure that that tab is highlighted in order for this to work. Second tab. I'm going to go up to shell. I'm going to go to title. I'm going to go to tab title and say PSQL. Oh. And there I have Rails, and PSQL is going to be our pSQL, Postgres commands. Okay, so you just open this up. Let me make sure. So just make it easier later to do this. Let me select this out. No, it never does it on the first one.
Joe, do we need to be in the student examples for both tabs?
Yeah, I would be in the student. If you open this one in student examples, when you did Command T, it would have opened this also in student examples. Yeah, the second one, the pSQL one, isn't as important where you start pSQL. We just have to spin it up. It's like Mongo. Mongo didn't care what tab you were in or what directory. The service, the Mongo service needed to be started. So the Mongo thing just needed to be listening. Rails will be important because Rails will be our server. And it's kind of like Node. I couldn't just run, NodeMon and expect that it would know intuitively where to go. We'd have to be in the file that had package.json because that's what it was looking for. Okay? Cool? Rails, PSQL. We might need a third tab, but these will be fine for right now. Cool? 1013. I really want everybody on the same page. This will just make it so much easier. So it really does get confusing when you're looking and you're like, what tab am I in? Having 2 or 3 of them open confuses me. I get confused really easy. Sweet. 1920. All right. We want to spin up. So when we run this command, let me just discuss kind of what's going to happen. Rails, new, contacts, D, PostgreSQL, skip, get. So what we're saying is here, Rails is the command, right? Rails is like saying node and then adding things to it. So Rails, we're going to do something. What are you going to do? We want to create a new web server, right? That's kind of what we want to do. We're going to create a new web server. Contacts, that's going to be the fundamental name of our web server. D states that we are going to be using a particular, setting the database to Postgres. That's what we're going to be setting it. And the skip get really is important here because we are in a Git repo right now, right? DeVito, SEIR DeVito is a Git repo. Every folder, every file that you've touched has been part of this main Git repo, and the last thing that you want to do is initialize a Git repo within another Git repo. Okay? If anyone's done that and try to push things up, you'll see that that sub Git repo is just like a folder, and you can't even get into it in Git. It's untouchable at that point in time. So Rails is like, hey, everything should be really a Git repo, right? I mean, everyone's working in web development. This should be it. And we want to tell it not to do that, not to create that Git repo. I also want to do this just real quick before we run that command. If I go into PSQL, and you went into this heavily yesterday with Matt, right? You went into PSQL. If I do a \L, I should see that there's no contacts at all, right? All I did was go into the pSQL, type in PSQL, took me into the PSQL terminal, something you were in heavily yesterday, and I did a /L, and no contacts were there. So just give that a shot. I want to make sure that you do that, and that's.
Hey, Joe, this is an issue I had last night, and I found a way around it. But why is it when you type PSQL, it comes up and it says that no such file or directory? I had this issue a few times last night.
Did you have? I mean, you were working in PSQL with Matt yesterday. right?
Right.
The whole lecture
Like,
was PSQL.
it worked when I did it with him, but for some reason, whenever redoing it,
Mhm.
you have to like, I had to type like PSQL and a name of a directory that's already open for me
Got
to
it.
do anything.
All right, we'll get into that because we might have to start it. There's a command to start it up. So if it didn't work for you right now, don't worry about it. We'll get around to resolving that.
Okay.
Okay. Just for everyone else, did you see anything here that says contacts? Right? Nothing with contacts. Should be no contacts. These are just other things that I've created in the past for Postgres, other classes, other material. Okay. So cool. That was it. I'm gonna exit out of it. Just wanted to do that. I'm gonna clear my screen. Just wanted to make sure. I'm gonna go back into the Rails tab. It's important. We're in the Rails tab. This is where we want to do it. Not that they're both the same directory, right? I do it ls. There's nothing in here. So now we're gonna type in. Just gonna move this over so we can see the full command when we type it. Rails new. That's the command. We want to instantiate a new project called contacts /d host GraphQL 1s skip get. Okay, this is the command. Gonna hit enter. You're gonna see a bunch of stuff happen, right? Let's knock this out. Yeah, slacking out the whole command instead of just a snapshot of it. So you need the copy and paste if you could, right? Awesome. Thing created, everything, right? All of this stuff. Create a README file, a rake file, a Ruby version, gem file. Hey, it even creates a package JSON. Awesome. App. All of this stuff got created for us. We didn't have to do anything. When we built out Node, Node was like, create the controller file, create the server file, create everything by hand. Just on a side note, people have come up with express generators. An express generator creates the express structure for you. It's very opinionated. It puts things in places. It makes teaching Express just a little bit more complicated because it uses more advanced Node-esque commands and additional file and folder structure that just at the very beginning when you're learning service just makes it really, really hard to be like, oh, I get what this thing is doing, right? We don't want to spend time trying to explain what this tool was trying to do. Rails, you can't escape it. Rails is like, this is how you use Rails. You just don't spin the thing up and like do whatever you want, okay? But it does create a lot of files for us. All these public, we by now, you should be able to, when you do see something like public, a public folder is meant to render public files to users. So this should be pretty intuitive. When you see this on any web server, should probably mean the same thing. Hey, this is where if clients need something, they can access CSS or access templates or access whatnot. Bunch of tests, right? And then it installs things. It's using gem files, Rails, all of this, all of these, all of it. It's almost like when you install one Node package and then you see the Node modules folder like with a ton of things inside of it. This is it too, right? All of these do specific things. Some of them depend on other things. Hey, look here too. Look, Sass. Sass listen, right? We had a Sass lesson. You learned a little bit about Sass. So Sass can be utilized here. Okay, awesome. So if I do I'm going to get rid of that. If I do an ls, I see contacts, and we want to go into contacts, right? Change the directory to contacts. ls, I'm going to do an ls space -l so I can see them all as just a list. Once again, ls -l. Just throwing that in case we don't use it very often. And I see the main structure, the folders and files. Awesome. And then we want to open up that in Atom. So I'm going to say Atom dot, boop, and that should spin up a new Atom window over here. Boop, boop, and here we go. We have put this over here. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to put this down here. Move this over just a little bit. All right, here we go. And we have all of this stuff created, okay? Now, here's just a side note, you know, mistyping thing, make a mistake typing Rails new. It's best at this point in time. If you mistype something, if it was like, oh, I didn't want it to be contacts, I wanted it to be contact, right? That's what I wanted to be. Blow the server away and restart it. Because based on this naming convention, things are going to be in place that it expects, and it will be such a pain to like work with this. Can you fix it? Sure. But it'll be so much easier just to like blow the thing out. So, you know, there's even suggestions if you're 2 hours in to the thing, blow it out if you're coming across issues at that point in time. It's just really super opinionated. Okay, so once we have those folders, like I'm just going to open this up. Here's our folder structure, right? And if we delve into the app folder, we're going to see things like controllers, models, and views, right? Controllers already has a controller in there. Like we didn't really do anything, and there's a controller right there. This controller, and we understand classes. We worked with classes. I don't believe we've imported or inherited a class in Ruby yet, but this is just inheriting the kind of base controller. One class is inheriting from another class. There's nothing in here, absolutely nothing. You go to models, you'll see that there's an application active record here. If we go to views, there's a layouts, okay, and there's some other stuff in our application, okay? So there's stuff that looks like, from what we remember with like EJS, does that not look like EJS? Tell me that that doesn't look exactly like EJS, right? Little squigglies, right? I used to call them squids when I would teach EJS. This looks just like it. So the fact that you know a language already, you know not a framework. I mean, Node and Express isn't a framework, but you already know this other templating engine. You look at here, I could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's got to be like a partial. That would be my assumption. Or these are variables, right? This is equal, so that's a variable to something. This is a variable to something. This is also something else that's happening. So kind of, you could look at it and make or decipher some things. Maybe not everything, but you could. Okay, so what do we have there? We have all this stuff, but what is that stuff? So we have, once again, the comparison. The thing that we're already grounded in, Express. Express uses a package JSON, and Ruby uses a gem file. And so in the main app, I'm just going to kind of get out of the app there itself. I'll close that. I'm going to go to gem file. Gem file is our new package JSON. Well, once again, Ruby Rails has a package JSON for other intents and purposes, but the gem file is where we go to install gems. So if we did install a gem, boop, it would update the gem file. Because once again, when the application gets pushed up to Git and somebody downloads the application, you don't want to push up all of that additional software, because then that just bloats Git. Git's like, you know, if everyone includes all of this stuff for every application, man, Git just gets enormous. So why not just say, hey, if you want to use this application, you know, bundle install, that'll be the command, and it would install all of these gems. They even comment out some gems, like, oh, in case you wanted to use bcrypt, which is something that we have used, right? You've used bcrypt and bcrypt. So when they create packages, a lot of the developers are going to be like, hey, I know a lot of people on Rails and a lot of people on Node and Express, so I'm going to create a package that is supported on both. So in that instance, your skill set to write Ruby code and JavaScript code is pertinent, right? To be able to write packages for both platforms, okay? And that's a niche. That's a niche job, right? A lot of people don't need to master both of the technologies. A lot of them kind of lean towards one or the other. For the server, we used Express. Could have used half a dozen other servers for that. Express is one of the more popular ones. And for Rails, we're using something called Puma and Rack. So Puma is the server, okay, and Rack deals with kind of like the middleware. We know what middleware was. Like Morgan was middleware. If we did bcrypt, that was middleware. Things that sit between the request and the response cycle, right? It looks at the request, does a thing to the data, passes it on so that you can then do something with it and respond accordingly, okay? So we won't see a server file here, okay? But we do have other files. For our controllers, in Express we used controllers, and in Rails, now Express we called it controllers. Could have called it control. We could have called it my controllers. We could have called it anything we want. There was nothing that was hard-coded that we had to say controllers. In Rails, it has to be app controllers, right? It's already pre-created for us, and it must be controllers. There's no other way around it. Renaming that folder right now would mess up Rails. Now, in Express, we had models. We still have models here, app models. Once again, they're structured. And in views, we used DJS. Handlebars, once again, is another common one. But we also used Angular. So you actually have a background in at least 2 other templating engines, EJS and Angular. Angular building like an application. And you will soon have 3, React, right? So you're actually going to be able to say, hey, I can talk EJS, Angular, and React, right? Which makes you more versatile. ERB is Rails, but we're not going to use it. We're going to set this thing up to be a backend server rendering JSON, and when we get to React, we'll learn about React and incorporate React. That's important. Okay. So let us spin up our server. All right, so we're going to spin up the server. Let's do this. I'm here. I'm going to get rid of all those previous commands. Now, let's see what happens. I'm going to assume things are going to happen. We're probably going to start seeing errors from this point on, only because we're going to start seeing errors. See this red here? Those are errors and errors. So we're going to do it anyway. We're going to say Rails S. That's how we start a command. So I'm going to say Rails S. Bloop. See what happens. Let's see if it's going to work. Okay, so I'm going to paste this. Okay, start up your Rails server. See what we got. All right, looks good on my side. Doesn't look like there's any errors here. Okay. Obviously, up to this point, we've all been in the contacts folder, right? That's what we'd be investigating, unless you were migrating outside of that folder, right? If I was to try to run Rails S in another folder, right? So if I just change up and I go here and there's no Rails in there, there's no Rails app, and I did Rails S, well, this should result in some sort of like, hey, there's nothing in here. Like, I'm getting all this stuff. Like, hey, I don't know what you're trying to do. Rails new app. Like, where's the thing that you want to start? No real errors, but it's not starting it up, right? Structure examples. Okay, sweet, right? So Rails started. Okay, now let's test. Let's test that local host, right? Remember when we just set up our Express server, we had to say, listen on port 3000. This thing is already listening on port 3000. Oh, snap. We get that error message. Right? Once again, test that your server is running and that you got this error. And I want to point out, when I had taken you through doing PSQL to confirm whether a contacts database existed, I did that for a reason. I knew that this error was going to happen, right? It was expected that this error would occur. We said use Postgres as a database, but we never spun up a new database. And look, I want to talk about the opinionation of this also. I don't know if that's even a word. The fact that it's so opinionated because it's looking, I didn't tell it what database to look for, right? And all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm looking for a contacts_development database. And we're like, but that's, I don't even know what you're talking about. I just said create an application called Contacts, and it is trying to spin up a thing called a database called contacts_development, which we don't yet have, right? You have all these errors. You're never really going to figure anything out. If you're like, oh, let me take a look here, look at you know? So.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Does it matter if our error is different than your error?
I would say yes.
Mine says connection bad. It doesn't say no database. It says connection bad.
So when you spun up your server, so just to be clear, when you spun it up here, did it work fine here?
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you tried to go here to localhost 3000, it's saying server bad?
Yes. Well, connection bad.
Can you share your screen? I'm just curious. Did anyone else yet?
I got connection bad also.
I got the same thing.
You got connection.
Yeah, I got connection bad. Could not connect to server.
All right. So I'm going to take a look because I think, let me just see if the next error, no database, contacts database does not exist. Oh, so this
is your PSQL
right
still running?
So here you go. This was the first one we should have got. Look at this. All right. So here's the thing. I'm getting a different error message. I'm getting the next error message, and you're getting that error message, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Here's the reason. What it's trying to do is it's trying to connect to Postgres. And I remember yesterday, Matt was working you through Postgres, and it was trying to do it. I jumped to what my error was, but my machine always runs Postgres. I have something set up so that kind of Postgres is always listening and always running. I don't ever have to worry about starting the Postgres service. If you got connection bad, that means it's trying to connect to Postgres. And it's like, the Postgres service isn't there. Like, I'm trying to talk to it on the port 5432, and it's not listening. There's nothing there responding back. So what you're going to do, if you receive that message, type in that, what I just posted, or copy and paste it, and that will start up the Postgres service. Okay? Once again, things are dependent on other things. It's been such a long time since I had Postgres running. I'd have to take a look and see where I automatically set it up to run. And
Which terminal window do we type that in? The Rails?
Oh, that really, I would type that into the, it really doesn't matter, but type it into the PSQL window. How about that? So if you do that, it should start up the service, and it should keep it running, right? It'll keep it running in the terminal, kind of like MongoD did. Cool. So we only had 4, right? 4 or 5. Anyone who had that error message, connection bad.
Mine is still saying that the database doesn't exist.
Okay, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
That's the next error.
Yay.
Little baby steps. Yeah. The intent here is, once again, what is Rails doing? What is the process that's happening? We told Rails to use Postgres, but is Postgres even started and listening? If it's not, it doesn't work. Same thing that happened to us with Mongo. Cool. All right. Well, let's get over that one. Start up that. Cool. If in Mongo or in Express, if we try to access a database that didn't exist, we would get errors. For our sake, Mongo was so smooth that it was like, boom, I'm going to create the database. Like, if you ask for a database, you just point and reference it. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to go ahead and create it. It's pretty intuitive like that. Postgres is not as intuitive. Okay? So everybody's good, right? I got 12 that had that issue. Now we're moving on to this one. So database does not exist, correct? All right. And we know that. When I went to PSQL, I knew, I'm going to go there. I'll take a look again, and I'll do \l. I know that there is no database there, of course. That's why it's breaking. All right? So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to exit out. I just wanted to show you that it doesn't exist. Okay. So what we need to do, now the Rails server is already kind of running. So this terminal window, we're not going to be using because it's running server unless we canceled it. Postgres here, if you started the Postgres service, it should be running also, correct? That should be running. So I'm going to start maybe another terminal window here. Okay. Should just take us back in here. And what we want to do now is type this. We want to type Rails DB database : create. Okay. This is what we want to do. Okay. So I'm going to select that out. What that's going to do is create our database. Okay. Now it says here we may need to restart the Rails server. We might come into some sort of issue. I've seen this. Why did it error out? Am I not in? Okay, I'm not in contacts, so I have to be in contacts, right? Okay. Just gonna clear this. I need to be in the folder. I can't run these Rails commands. Everything needs to be in here also. So let me run Rails DB create. Let's see what we get. Whoa, snap, created the database. Created database contacts development. Created database contacts test. Once again, I'm just going to kind of prove that it did. I go to PSQL, /L, look, 2 databases created. We didn't have to do much. It knows what to create. Now it's creating development and test. Those are the naming conventions that it's creating for us. That's fine for us right now. Okay. So I'm gonna.
I figured it out already, but I had an error, and I'm just wondering if there's a quicker way to restart Rails like there is with Notamon. Like in Notamon, you can like just hit RS to restart it, or do you have to Control C and then do Rails S the whole way?
I think you have to do Control C and restart it. There might be, I'm sure there is a quick way. Off the top of my head, I don't know if there is another one, like Nodemon kind of restarting the server.
Just curious.
Yeah. That's a good question, though. Off the top of my head, I don't know. And now that we have that, I'm going to go back, and hopefully you should get that. Correct? Rails is working fine now. Okay, just give me a thumbs up, diamond, whatever you want to give me to confirm that it's all working now. No more errors, everything's up and running. We have our Rails server, right? This is default. A lot of the times the servers give us the default. Node would give us, React's going to give us like a default page when we spin up a web server. Rails gives us that just to let us know, hey, things working, everything's set up. Once again, very opinionated in what we need to do, but we got it done.
Yeah, no, I think I'm still missing something. I don't
Okay.
know what.
All right. What's the error that you're getting?
Well, I'm not getting an error. I mean, the site isn't coming up, but I don't know. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I don't.
What I might suggest is this, like stopping the Rails server and restarting it.
Okay. Let me...
Once again, we can try that. I mean, we can stop sharing and you can share yours and we can take a look at it. Today is going to be a lot about errors. Trust me, little small nuances are just going to produce errors. Let's just take a quick look and see how we can fix. All right, so there we go. All right, so that, when I see an error like this kind of tells me that Rails isn't started. That's what that tells me. Site can't be reached. Rails isn't giving us an error. This is just the site cannot be reached. So what Yeah, go into the
think it
Rails
needs
tab.
to be in contacts too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm at. How?
So
then
do an LS. Just do an LS right there. Do LS, and you're in student examples. It doesn't look like you created anything. If you did an LS, I don't see student. I don't see the contact server there.
Okay. Well, how do I get there?
So
Because I think that's what I
this
missed.
tells me that you need to create the server. So what we're going to do is this. So you have the Rails tab, right? So go to the Rails tab. I just want to make sure. Go to the Rails tab. Stop what's going on. Control C there. It looks like it's the database that's going, right? Clear the screen. I want to make sure all the errors are gone. That tells me that like that's data. Do an LS. We shouldn't see anything there. Nothing there. So wherever you created it wasn't in student examples. So what you want to do is run the command, this command. Let me just paste the command. You want to run that command. Once you run that command in the Rails folder, it will create a contacts folder. Okay?
You do you mean in the Rails tab or?
Yeah, in the Rails tab. Remember, we created these tabs to keep us like, we'll be in Rails originally, we'll create it, we'll go into contacts, and then we'll run the Rails server from there. So since we're there, I'm just following the process that we had done. That should create it, right? We only had a few commands here. So if you look at the series of commands, it was Rails new contacts, right? Postgres, skip, and then we started up the server, and then that's where we hit, hey, the Postgres thing wasn't started. Cool. All right, let's start our Postgres. Oh, hey, the database isn't created. Let's create the database. Okay?
Okay.
So with Rails started, right? Make sure that, now do an LS. All right, so now go into contacts. There you go, do an LS, and you should see you have the Rails. Awesome, right? Now, before we start the server, go to PSQL tab and just make sure that is it running. So PSQL isn't running. So you want to do the Postgres command. See the command that we have up there? The Postgres one, just copy and paste that. Let's just make sure that it's running. Once again, I want to keep that PSQL tab, the same tab. Everyone's going to be on the same page. Awesome. Now go to Rails. Okay. And here, let's do Rails DB create. Just to make sure. Like, let's do DB create. If it exists, I don't think it's going to create it. It doesn't exist. Right, because Postgres is running. Look, created it. Awesome. Now do Rails space S. That's it. Sweet. Now go to your Rails, go to the website. Refresh. Booyah! See? Easy.
I think I missed like 3 of those steps. So
Okay.
cool.
That was an easy one. Trust me. It was just the steps. Once again, if you're not in the right folder, this is just, it's also a lesson in just when you are in a place, how do you troubleshoot? What's the first thing? I think Molly suggested, hey, are you in the contacts folder? So let's LS. Do we see contacts? If we don't, you could have ran the command. I just don't know where you ran the command, right? So we have our Rails server. Everything looks pretty solid.
Okay, so when I ran the DB create command, I just got like a printout of a bunch of stuff, like what Iris was looking at.
Okay. You can confirm that it created the database.
I have the database. I did an LS, and I see contacts there. Do I need to like CD into that?
No. Once again, once you're in contacts, right? When we started our web server, we were in contacts, right?
Right.
So that spin up the server. We went into the PSQL tab so that you could all start Postgres. Once again, I already have it started, but in this tab, Postgres would be running. And then in another tab, I just went to PSQL to confirm that the databases existed, right? Once we did the DB create. Are you getting any errors, Jeremy?
Like when I go to the
When you go to the website?
1000, it just says active record, no database error. It says fatal database context development does not exist.
Okay, so then that tells me either that it can't connect to it, and you've confirmed. So can you, I'm going to stop sharing. Share your screen. Share your screen, and let's see and show me that it does exist. And if it does, then we just may need to stop the server and restart the server. All right, so go into that tab and just do a PSQL in there. So which one is running Rails? Is this running Rails?
This is Rails, yeah.
All right, so what terminal can we go into that we can just run PSQL?
I could just do that from...
All right, so that's fine. No, do it there. Stop. Stay there and do PSQL. Yeah. Oh, so it's not going to run the PSQL command there?
Do I have to do PSQL contacts?
Oh, okay. I think you missed.
I can't spell. Sorry, I'm one-handing this.
All right. PSQL.
Okay, now it's saying it doesn't exist.
But you can't get into PSQL either, right? I mean, could you?
If I do like to go into like Postgres.
All right, so then do that. Do whatever it's going to take to get in. Now you're in there. Do a /out. Boom. It doesn't exist. So keep hitting enter, enter. Maybe it's like one of the last ones or something. Like, no, the database didn't exist. So what you need to do is go into the Rails server. Just go in there, right? Stop the server. How about we just stop the server? Control C, stop the server. Do DB Rails space DB:create. There you go. Should create it. There we go. Now do Rails space S. No.
Sorry. I should be good now. I'll let you guys get back to it.
All right. Just test. Everything should be good. Should be golden. Cool?
Mine has a similar error. Gesture is in the words. That's why.
Okay. Share your screen then. Let's see. I'm just starting to see some of the same similar errors, right? So connection bad. So what does that say? Can I see the error? Is that the same errors we were getting? Connection bad. You do not, my assumption here, Young Sub, is you don't have Postgres running. So on your PSQL tab, go to your PSQL tab. At the very top, you have the two tabs, Rails and PSQL. No, don't type anything. Go to the tab up top. In the terminal window, you have two tabs. That one and then the one right after next, to the right of it. Go to the right. Click on the right one. Oh, we were in the right one. All right, click on that. All right, so now you have to type in the Postgres command, that Postgres space $D. You know, it might be sometimes easier just to copy and paste the command. It's $D. It's dash. Go into, instead of typing it all out, just go into the Slack channel and copy and paste what we Slack. Nope, that's not it. It has to be Postgres space -D. $D. No, 4 says, here. I'm going to Slack it.
Slash.
Copy and paste that. What I just Slacked. Copy and paste that.
Yeah, trying people but not worked. Anyway.
Okay. Could not access directory Postgres. No such. Oh, so yeah. So try this. Postgres could not access directory. No such file exists. Oh. So it looks like something happened to Postgres. Now, was Postgres working for you fine yesterday?
No, not at all. Yesterday working, but not today. Not at all.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Postgres could not access the directory, because that's not the error. The error is here is Postgres could not access directory, user local Postgres. No such directory exists. Oh, what is it? What is it? Postgres D. Postgres could not access directory. And so if you tried typing Postgres, try PSQL space Postgres, that won't work either. I'm just curious. I want to just see.
I tried everything in the instruction, but nothing working. So I just reinstall like from Brew, PSQL.
Oh, you reinstalled PSQL?
Just I did just a few minutes ago because it's not working at all, but it's not. Still.
When you reinstalled it, how did you reinstall it? Like, what was the process of reinstalling it? Once again, when we installed Postgres, it was done, a specific way. I just want to make sure.
So I follow this.
All right. I think when we installed Postgres, we did it using Homebrew, right? So that's what you did? Delete. So it also tells me, I've had to do this before. So what it's telling us is this process to fix this issue. Do you see just above where it says brew install Postgres, the command before that says delete all files of Postgres. This particular article I've gone to several times. This article states where Postgres no longer works, right? So go to the very top, and the article says to do a series of steps. If you did not do all of those steps, brew uninstall Postgres, remove all the files, the error is going to persist. This particular article is about when Postgres breaks, how do you fix it? And part of fixing it is uninstalling Postgres completely.
Oh.
So you just saying, I'm just going to reinstall it, that didn't fix it, right? So at the very top of this article walks you through the steps. So we're going to go on break. We're going to take a break right now before we jump into the next module. I'll walk you through going through these steps because we have to go through these steps in order to fix this. Okay? So why don't we'll take a 10-minute break. What time is it? 12:23. 12:43, come back. And Young Sub, stay there and I'll help you work through this.
Okay, thank you.
Come back. Hopefully we can get this working. All right, so go to the top of that article, please. Go to the top. Go back to the article. Yeah, I'm watching your screen. This is all you. You're the man. Okay, so here. All right, so remove previous versions of Postgres. Run that command. Copy and paste that command.
Yeah.
So open your terminal. Yeah, just paste it in. There we go. It's going to force Postgres, refusing to uninstall because it is required by PostGIS, which is currently installed. You can override this and force removal with, copy and paste that. Whatever, we're going to force this thing. Copy and paste that command. Brew, uninstall. No, just copy and paste that command. No, not there. Go back to the terminal. To the terminal. You see where it says you can override this and force removal with?
Uh-huh.
Copy that whole thing from the terminal.
Okay.
Move your mouse there. Just copy that. No, just the brew install, uninstall till the Postgres. Just that one line. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Copy that. Copy that one line. The whole thing though, the whole line. Brew uninstall to post. Yeah, that's it. Copy that.
Yeah.
Now get rid of what's there. Yeah, just bag it. Now paste it. All right, try doing that. All right, awesome. We did it, right? Now let's go back to try just doing the brew uninstall files. I just want to make sure that thing we don't need to run it again. Do brew uninstall for. All right, no, actually, no. Delete all files of Postgres. Delete all files of Postgres. The command, copy that.
Yeah, okay.
Now go there. Run that. Let's see what we got. No, run the, no, not that. Yeah. All right, did. Sweet. It happened so quick, I didn't see it. Get rid of that. Yeah, brew uninstall post. Yeah, there we go. Go back to the article. I just want to see what more commands we need. Just click on the article again.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to see. We might need to do a few more things, right? Then it's like, hey, start Postgres. Oh, because then it says install PostGIS. I don't think we need to install PostGIS. I want to like only do what we need to do. So let's just see if this works. We don't need to run these additional commands.
Okay.
I don't know if we do. We may or we may not. Try typing PSQL. I just want to see if PSQL works. Okay, fatal database, Brian.
Yeah. Database.
I think you just, do Postgres. Yeah, there you go. You're in.
Finally.
Yeah.
Thank you for help.
All right, no worries. So that gives us just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Go take a break, walk away. I'm going to go fill up some water. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Sweet. Hey, Kyung-sub, if you're still there, I forgot we needed to get you up and running with Rails also. You fixed one issue, so I'll Slack you. Great, Young Sub. It's working great. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for help. Yeah, great.
That's what we're here.
Yeah.
You need to enjoy the wonders of Rails. It happened today.
So struggle on the unknown error, Yeah, suddenly it's not working PSQL because it worked well yesterday.
Yeah.
So I really figure out what happened. So like a reinstall or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've come across, I've worked with Postgres, teaching these immersives. There's always something, especially when it comes to the databases, that always breaks. There's always something that this doesn't work and that doesn't work. Everyone's machine is unique. Sometimes people install things in the Wayback Machine. They come to class. I don't know. So I've seen that same article that you were looking at. And I've worked through it several times with other students, and it's the same process. Like, oh, I'm just going to reinstall it. And a reinstall doesn't always do the fix. You have to like remove the old bad stuff that caused it to break. Yeah.
I know, yeah. Thank you.
You're all good. So, yep. Looks good. Looks like everyone is back. Here we go. All right. We are now that Rails, a wonderful Rails server is running, we are working on building out the index route. So now we're walking down the road of actually like building out the controllers, rendering something, right? Because that's the ultimate goal. We want to render some data. So I'm going to try to move this over here a little bit. I'm going to open up this. So I have it over here. And where's my terminal window? Once again, we won't need to go into the Rails tab, right? Rails server is running. We don't really have to do much. PSQL tab is the tab that you have running. Postgres should be running, right? And then so I opened up this third tab to simulate going into PSQL and to determine if the database exists, right? So I'm just going to exit for now, all right? I'm going to clear my screen. All right. So what we want to do is have some data in the database, right? We've created a database, but our database really contains nada. It doesn't really have anything, right? So we're going to connect to the database, and we are then going to add some information to the database, right? So I'm on that third tab now, where I'm going to be using the PSQL commands. Okay, so I'm going to type in PSQL. I'm in
Joe,
there.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, snap. Sorry. I forgot that Kyung Sub was sharing earlier. All right. I almost feel like I got to take it from the beginning. So I did slag out the lecture. This is where we're at. I'm on this new tab, okay, where I'm going to be running PSQL commands. This tab is for server, Rails. Never going to touch that again unless we need to stop and restart the server. PSQL tab should be running and processing PSQL. And then this other tab is where we can go into PSQL and do some things. So I typed in PSQL \C, and I'm going to connect to the contacts _ development database, right? So once again, I'm going to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Hey, Joe, remember some of us that PSQL thing doesn't work for?
Now, were you able to?
You just have to like specify. If you don't tell it which directory you want to get into, it won't let you do it. So if you want to start it up, you have to do PSQL, Postgres, or.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just typed in Thad, the command that you should type in to get into the.
Yeah, that's how I have been doing it. I just didn't know if there was anything.
No, well, we should figure out a way to fix it, but for right now, this will work.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing.
Once again, when we get a shot at it, we can just look at PSQL. It's just I don't know what it is. I'd have to take a look. It's just some sort of pointer isn't working. But cool. I think what happens too is PSQL command is looking for a default database. When you just type in PSQL, it's looking for a default database to start. So when it starts, if I do L, let me just see, is it going to work? Yeah. It looks for, like, I think the username. It looks for this person's username. If it does not find that, it errors out. If you tell it the database you want to log into, it then takes you in there. But by default, it's kind of looking for this. I know that because I've had to fix that, create it, and then it worked. But we won't worry about that right now. As long as you're in, you're in. Cool?
I'm in.
Awesome. All right. So now that I'm in, all right, we're in the contacts database. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to copy and paste all this. We're not manually, yesterday was the grueling day, like manually typing and creating all that. We need to be connected to the contacts development database. I did post that. So I'm hoping everyone is in that. And I'm going to paste, and that should work. And then we should see it. Okay? So give me just a thumbs up, or whatever icon you want to use to confirm. See that? Everyone's following the thumbs up. Love it. And the Joe emoji. Joe emoji. What was the mad emoji and the Jericho emoji? Somebody's got to create other emojis. They're just as special as me. They deserve their own emojis.
Matt has two. Matt has a hut and a muffin.
Yeah, get his face there. I want to see Matt's face.
There's also a not muffin.
That's true. There's there's a not muffin too.
All right, then put me on a surfboard. If you're going to do that, I want to be on a surfboard. I should at least get to choose.
I was going to make you a not emoji.
Oh, what? Oh, a not emoji? I will take that. I still do the knots. I still go into that knot side. I love it. Awesome. So we have our data doing the select star from people. We know that we have people. So if I do the \DT, we see that for our data table that we have the people table. And you know that it works because we just ran this select star from people. So our database is contacts _ development. Our table is people. Okay? That's cool. Now we have people to, things to play with in a little bit. All right. So now routes are created differently in Rails than in Express. Okay? So we're going to make an index route by opening the config routes RB file. So I'm going to go into Atom, and we are going to look for the config folder, which is right here. So I'm just going to minimize the app, expand the config, and here's routes. Once again, it's like it created it for us. Like we really didn't have to do anything in order to get that created. It's just like, boop, let me create it for you. Okay. So now that we have it created, we have to go in and start adding some routes to it. Okay, so here we go. This is our routes file here. So I'm going to go in here. All right, what we're going to do is type in the method get. That's the first thing. What's the thing that you want to do? I want to get. All right, so I'm going to do single quotes / what's the route? People, that's the route. Comma, where are we going? So 2 says, hey, when that route gets hit, what is the controller and what is the controller method that you want to execute? So I'm going to say 2, single quotes again. I want to hit the people controller, pound index method. Okay? That's what we're doing. Very, very similar to what we did in Express, not in the way we're writing it. Obviously, visually, it does not look like it, but it is the way that we would. I'm just going to tab this over. Once again, it should be tabbed over. I'm going to save the file. Okay. So what it's doing now is it's going to look for a people controller, which we don't have, and an index method inside this people controller. Okay. That's what it's looking for. If we try to go there right now, obviously, just to produce an error, right? If I was like, oh, hey, let me go to people and see, it's people, and we're like, boop, uninitialized constant people controller. Take a look at that naming convention. It's telling us it's looking for a controller called people controller. That's super relevant here. The fact that it's looking for a controller called people controller is pertinent. Okay, it's a framework. It's very opinionated. Okay, move this over here. I don't know why that opened up its own. All right. So we're gonna create a controller. Okay. So I'm gonna go into, or we're gonna go into the app controllers, right? So I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go back into app, inside controller. I'm gonna create a new file. So I'm already in Atom. I don't want to go to the terminal and do touch. So I'm just going to right click and say new file and say people underscore controller.rb. Boom. Now that's important. That's important because our routes are pointing to this people. This people is going to look for a people's controller, a file called people. It knows that this thing exists here. If you type people, it's going to look for a controller folder, right? And inside that controller folder, it's going to look for a file that has people in it, right? It just auto-populates underscore controller. It knows that you don't need to type that. It's just like, cool, you got it. All right. So in our people controller, let's go here. We're gonna have to do a few things, okay? So we have to create a class called people controller, and we're gonna inherit from the application controller. And then we're gonna do end. Just make sure that our end is there, okay? Create that structure. Okay, spelled it right, people control, application controller, okay. Once again, the naming construct is super important, okay? Because it's the people controller. This class needs to be called people, uppercase P, uppercase C, okay? And these two uppercases, they're gonna indicate the underscore. Like that this controller is uppercase C, it kind of insinuates that that's where the underscore is here, okay? I'm gonna save it. Nothing really happens just yet. Okay. So I did slack it out. Just make sure you create the structure. Once again, the naming conventions are really important here. Taking it slow is gonna help us resolve tons of errors that can happen from just mistyping one character. Uppercase, lowercase. There we go. Surfboard. Love it. There you go, Aaron. That's me.
We have to create one for you, but for now, that will do.
I'll do. Surfing season. So surfing season. Excited. Big storm blew up in New York yesterday, and it'll be raining today, but they had like tornado warnings in Staten Island. Pretty crazy, which means the waves are going to be pretty crazy this weekend.
I was going to say, it was pretty bad crazy here.
Yeah, scary. We got 17, 18? Awesome. All right, here we go. We're going to create the rest. So I'm just going to create some space here so we can clearly delineate what's being created. I'm going to tab it over. So def, again, it's a method. Index is the name of our method. All right, I'm going to close it. Okay. And just like React, keep going to React, just like Express, we have to render something, right? We had res.render. Here it's render. What do you want to render? I want to render JSON. Awesome. What do you want to send? I want to send something that's like, hey, message. Hi. You know, status 200. Status 200 means that everything went well, right? Okay. So if we have a routes, and if our route tells us to go to a people controller, when we hit the people controller, and the people controller has the method that we told it to hit, index, and that is configured to render something, this should work, right? Okay. Just gonna make sure that's the structure, and I'm gonna test it out. Let's go to people, and boom, should work fine. We are at this point an API server. That's what you are. You have just turned into an API server. Okay. Move this down. Look at that. Cool. So we're good. 14. Test it out. Make sure it works. 15 working. Awesome. What I also want to do is, because we're going to be working in these files, what I want to do is split this and maybe like, here's our routes. I'm going to go up to view, right? So on this tab, I'm going to go up to view and panes. I'm going to split this thing down. So people controller is here. And I'm just going to exit out of that people controller, okay? We're going to need to create multiple routes, a get, a post, a delete, a put. So there's going to be multiple routes here, and each route is going to be configured in people controller, right? There's going to be corresponding methods that do the thing in people controller, okay? So this will just be an easy way for us to kind of take a look at both files, just like we did with the tabs earlier, okay? I mean, you can have them all on one tab. It's just, you know, whatever easiest for you. I'm just trying to. So now that we have this, now that we have, and we confirm that we can send an object as JSON, awesome. What if we wanted to send data, right? Because the ultimate goal is not just to send this predefined hello, hi, status 200, but we want to send some data. So we're going to send this array. I'm just going to copy paste it. I'll Slack it out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to test it, and it works. Awesome. Here, I'm going to Slack it out. So I replaced the message, you know, the object, with an array of data, and it sent it out. Okay? You know, I believe we could probably have done something like, I don't know, and you would have seen this. I'm just going to do this. You don't have to do this. I'm going to say maybe like, I don't know, hey, data. Let's see if this works. I'm going to error out. You know, if you're sending an object, I'm going to switch this back. I'm just trying to convey that when you were making API calls for like your first project, right? Project 1, you had to make an API call. In project 3, you were pulling data. It never really sent it back as an array. It always sent it back as an object that had the data stored as an array of objects or whatnot. It may not have been called data. It may have been called results, right? So some of yours that pulled data was called results. The naming convention changes depending on who's creating it, but in the end, the structure of the content, using arrays to structure similar things, objects to define key value pairs on a very unique thing that is related to the other things inside the array. So I'm just gonna, once again, I'm just gonna get rid of that. I just wanted to show you that how you decide to structure your data is important, because on the receiving end is how they're gonna use their ability to traverse arrays and objects and nested things inside of other things in order to get to the values that they need. All right. Obviously, we don't want to just send this hard-coded data, right? Our goal is to send data from our database, right? So I'm just going to go in here. We're in models. Instead of touching it, I'm in here. I'm just going to make it easier for myself. I'm going to create a new file. You can touch it. You can create it from here. I'm going to call it person.rb. Okay? Person.rb. And because I have this model now, person.rb, I'm going to split this off as well. Once again, just my preference. I'm going to split it down, and I'll get rid of it here, just so I have 3 separate tabs. I can kind of like see Joe's not to. It's going to be a fun day. I miss teaching. It's fun being up here and then seeing little things like that. All right. So person RB created the file. We're going to populate this file. We're going to create a class called person. We're going to end, right? Always create the structure. Create the thing. I'm just creating some space between where the class ends and the class begins and the end statement. Awesome. So we're going to create a new method. And this should look familiar, self.all. Oh. Or not self.all, but self, right? When we were doing methods with like Mathy, and we wanted to call the Mathy method, you know, instead of instantiating a new instance of the Mathy class, or the Mathy class, we just wanted to call the Mathy class as though it was its own thing. We didn't have to really do anything, okay? And so here what we're going to do is take the data, okay? So this is a status function, right? That's called on the class itself, not an instance. We're not instantiating instances of it, okay? And we are going to return back data. So we are going to, once again, I'm just make sure that this was created. Okay? Sure that that structure is created. Because at this point in time, it's just a matter of cutting out that JSON and putting it in there. That's it. Okay? Maybe I should have waited to slide it out. So all I did was cut out from the people controller the array, and I put it in there. All right. Goodness, all my files are.
So
whoa.
Can that colon stay after the JSON?
Oh no, we're gonna add something. We didn't. It's gonna error if we do this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're gonna go here and reference that model now by saying person.all. Okay. Yeah, I didn't finish. So this is our model, right? This is our people controller now. So what we're doing here is we're referencing the model, right? So we're saying, hey, we hit the route people. Cool, we go to people. People says go to this people controller. Awesome, I'm gonna go to the people controller. I'm gonna look for the index method, found it. Hey, index method, what do you wanna do? Well, I wanna render JSON, but in order to render the JSON that we want, we have to go to the person model and find the all method. And so we go down to the person model, we find the all method, and we return what's there. So I'm gonna go here, let's see, and it works. I mean, nothing's changed, right? I mean, you can test by maybe, creating a new entry here if you wanted to. just to make sure, you know, hey, name, Joe the Surfer, right? You can create whatever you want. Age, I always put 21 because that's how I feel. Feel young. Let's see what we get. Oh, can I not save it? That's weird. Maybe I have to restart the server. That should have worked. All right, Joe the Surfer, age 21. I'm surprised that didn't work. So,
But don't you have to save
oh, you know what? I thought I did save. I must have been up here and saved. Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
your controller's not saved either.
Oh, it's one of those days. There we go. Thanks. I thought I was doing really.
Can you just run through real quick
Sure.
what happened? You said we were at the on line 4 of the routes. You said we were looking for a people controller,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
which takes us to the file in the middle.
Yeah. So let me
Right,
see.
and then line 4 again bumps us to the file at the end.
Yeah. So
What render?
So what we're doing here is obviously that's our route, right? So that is coming from there, right? So we hit a route, tells us to go there. We know to go there. This becomes our controller, right? So it's looking for a file called people controller, right? This index method here is that method right there, right? So we're hitting people, the controller, and inside the controller we have that method. Awesome. We hit that method. We're saying to render, and we know what render does, right? Render wants to give something back to the user, whatever it is that you want to render. JSON is the format, right? So JSON becomes the format upon which we're rendering, right? When we did it before, we could have rendered ERBs. We could have just done res.send in Express. Here we want to say JSON. Person becomes our model. So it's uppercase, and it's looking now for this file, and inside of that file, that method, right? Or that class, and all becomes the method that we're hitting. So this data right here, this chunk of data is what's returned, right? So that gets returned, and then that gets sent to the user. Does that make sense?
It does. Can you snapshot that?
Yeah, you know, I want to start using more of this tablet. It's pretty awesome. Snapshot it. Boop. All right. I do have that thing. Let me see if I can remove this. Move it up a little bit. Sweet. I'm going to take one more snapshot. Bloop, bloop. Here we go. Let me snag it. There we go. Can I get rid of this and still save it? Yeah, there we go. All right. I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to clear out the annotations. Bloop. Awesome. Let's clear my junk. All right. If you can save it there. All right. Oh, you can't save it. Sweet. I'm going to try to save it next. All right. Cool. Let's go back here. Awesome. So that's what's happening. Our model is always responsible for, this is about separations of concerns, right? Models go get the data. That's what they do. Controllers dictate what model should be executed, right? And maybe it's going to be responsible for passing data to that model. And the routes know what controller to hit. So separations of concerns. The names of these files are very unique. They need to be named this way. Otherwise, things will break. Okay, it's very opinionated. I'm surprised everything's working as it is, because a lot of times at this point in time, somebody mistypes something or not, and then we start breaking. Obviously, I'm the one that had the issue because I wasn't even saving files, right? All right. Now, we haven't yet at this point in time gone to Postgres, right? All we've done at this point in time is like hit a model, but this is like a faux pas model because it's not going to the database. It's just rendering these 4 things that I ultimately rendered. What we want, though, is to render data. Okay, so in our person model, what we're going to want to do is connect to the database. So I'm just going to paste this right here. I'm going to slack it out. And what we're doing, I'll explain what we're doing here. Very, very similar to what we did in Mongo, right? Where we're connecting to the database. So I'm saying, hey, the host is going to be localhost. What's the port? Well, Postgres listens on a specific port. It listens on port 5432. And what's the database name that you want to connect to? Like, hey, that's the database that I want to connect to. Awesome. Now we just created a connection. Okay, the fact that this connection is stored in DB, we can reference DB later on. Okay, so inside of self, right? So we're inside of the def self because that's ultimately we're going to be using this call, right? This is just the connection to set it up so that any method models that we create can leverage. This is our call to it, right? So create a connection to Postgres. Okay, and that connection, very similar to, I think it might have, did I not have it open up? No. Similar to this. I had it open because I knew we'd be doing this at some point in time. This is our Express app, and this is how we were kind of connecting to the database. Like here, connect to Mongo. That's our database, right? So we're connecting via that to say, hey, that's the thing that we want to connect to, right? And then this was our Mongo's connect to Mongo, right? We needed these to set them up to tell us the connection and the database to connect to. And here, same thing, right? Connection and the database to connect to. It just kind of wraps it up into like one really small, terse line of code versus Mongo. So in here, I'm just going to pull this up a little, right? Inside our self.def file, we're going to say, hey, the results are going to be equal to db dot the exec command, and I'm going to do opening and closing, select star from people, semicolon, because this is an SQL command. This is the database is executing a query, right? So this is executing a query. Put that as a note. Execute an SQL query. Okay, we know what that is. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to, now it gives it back to us. It gives it back to us as an array. We're going to say results.each, do the following thing. And call each thing inside the array result. Okay, I'm going to put an end here so I know where it ends. And we are, for right now, just going to put result. We just want to make sure that this works. So the results that we're going to get on the screen are going to be this. But the results that we should see in the terminal should be this. Or we should see that output. Okay? So let's get this in there. Okay? Well, I forgot to put the end there, so I'm going to just edit this real quick. Just so. Oh, no, we don't need the end. Yeah. Cancel changes. End is already there. I'm just put the results. If we have this, we can test it. Right? We can go here. Just make sure I didn't break anything. Oh, nothing broke. That's great. All right. I'm going to open the terminal. I go to the Rails server. Boom. I see the data. That's awesome. Excuse me. Wet. Just trying to get my Duet display going again. Sometimes it goes out and I can't draw if it's not up and running. All right, so confirm you see the results, right? If that works, confirm in your terminal, you see those results, and now we have, or we know that our connection to the database is working. We can pull data, which means if we can select star from people, we can start adding where clause, select star from where, or we could send the ID of the element that, where the ID is equal to this and return back a single element, right? Or give it data to update, right? All these things are going to be possible now that we know that we have a connection to the database, okay? Now, what we did was still kind of console log this stuff. We didn't really return it to the user, and we still have this data here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that array. We don't really want that array there anymore, right? Okay. Def self all, we got this def. We get rid of this end here, right? No. Return maps do. I think we might need that extra end. All right. So we have results. We're just going to edit this slightly, right? So results now is going to, I'm going to get rid of this code right now and add return, because we want to return the thing immediately. So results dot map do, once again, the individual thing is result, right? And then we are curly braces. What we need to do is loop through this array of things and kind of recreate the object. So I'm going to say ID and then result bracket ID to integer. It's an ID and we need to convert it into an integer. We need to say name. Okay. Result name. And age. Result age. Now age is also an integer. Okay. Def self all, that should end that should end that should end the person. So I'm gonna just put a note here, ends person class, so I know. Ends def self dot all, and this one should end map. Okay. Sometimes these ends get confusing. I'm going to test this out first. Let me just make sure it works. I don't want to paste it if it's going to break. Boom, it works. Sweet. So I'm going to slack out the whole def itself, just in case. That's what we're doing. So what we're doing is we're getting the results, right? Which we knew when we got the results earlier. We saw that the results were an object, right? And so what we're doing is we're sending those objects out. We're looping over the return of a map. The map creates an array, because what you'll see here is that it's an actual array, right? The difference between using map, filter, and reduce, or for each, is the fact that for each doesn't return things, but map, filter, and reduce return an array. So here we're just, short-circuiting it, saying like, hey, you're going to return the array. Let's just, instead of storing in a variable, just return the end result of you doing the map. Okay? And then we have all of our users here.
Joe, can I ask why? So what's the difference between that and just the results before we do that processing with the map? Is it just the typing of the ID and age, or
I believe
is that all
so.
that we're changing? Okay.
I think what we're doing is converting. See how it stores it as a string?
Mm-hmm.
And these are strings, and we wanted to do some sort of conversion to the data too. So this helped us convert it. Outside of that, it does look pretty identical, right? When we console logged ID, name, age, same thing. Nothing's really any different. We're just converting things into the values that we know the end user is going to want to have them in that format.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, those names and all those people, that was preloaded, right, into our stuff?
Oh, yeah, that was when we, at the very beginning, we had done this.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah. So we have all of our data, we have all of our users, and boom. Okay. And we've already organized, so the last part here was just like splitting these things out into the routes, people, and persons controllers. I'm sorry, persons model. But right, as of right now, we're kind of right where we need to be. Everything's working. We're working through building this out. We do have the additional methods that we will be working out are going to be things like the additional show a specific person, right? So there's going to be additional get routes. This get route will need to show one person. So we'll have to send an ID of something. We'll have to post, delete, put as well. These will be the other methods that we're going to have to do as well. Okay. I think, before we get to, I'm just thinking we only have 7 more minutes. Could we do an ID? So let me do this. Let me just see. I think so. Actually, you know what? No. Yeah, as long as everything's working.
So I have a question here. I don't remember what the significance of that using it here. On line number 10, 11, 12, instead of using colon or equals to, we are using equal to and a greater than sign. What does it do?
That's that's when you create kind of a hash object. So we could have, maybe we could have just done this too. Let me just say, in Ruby, there's 2 different ways to create a hash, right? Because that's what this is, key value pairs. Just make sure that that works. And that's just another way of creating a key value pair. This is kind of, this hash rocket is just the newer way of doing it. So I remember when we were looking through Ruby methods, right? And some of you were like, oh man, I found a method that does this, but there's like 2 or 3 other methods that do the same thing. I think, Pooja, you might have found one too, right? When we were doing Ruby methods, I thought you might have mentioned like, hey, this method, 2 methods do the same thing, or 3 methods do the same thing. And then the question is like, why? I'm not really sure why, but this is just another way to create an object using Ruby. I'd have to look into the nuances of using.
I wanted to understand. I just didn't remember.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, sometimes, the newer conventions. For me, this is more, right? This seems like more work. I have to type an extra character. So unless that extra character comes with added benefits, I don't really, I don't see the benefit of it. Awesome. So that's cool. So let's do this. Why don't we, since it's 1:25 now, why don't we break for lunch? Just say 5 minutes early. Still come back at 2:30. An extra 5 minutes. Maybe during that 5 minutes, you'll do algorithms. You'll be like, I'm going to listen to Joe with all intent and do some algorithms, right? And see, everyone's laughing like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do it. And yet you are, because now I'm in your head speaking. So, all right, cool. So we'll break for lunch now. We'll come back at 2:30 and we'll pick this up, okay? If you have any questions too, you can Slack me. Try to answer them when I get back. Awesome. Stop sharing in the meeting.